Welcome to the Aging Well Firefighter, the podcast for first responders, our families, and the communities we serve. Whether you're on the front lines or standing with us, I'm here to help you fight wisely and age bravely. Today we're talking about loneliness. Not the kind that comes from spending a quiet night alone at home, but the deep, chronic kind that can literally shorten your life. That kind of loneliness isn't just an emotional ache. It's a physiological hazard. Now, to illustrate this, I want to introduce you to two people who are polar opposites in a story that starts long before I ever set foot in a firehouse or a gym. Back when I spent my days and a lot of my nights working for a small IT firm. We only had a handful of techs on payroll to cover a client list that well outpaced our coffee supply. And one of those techs was a man I'll call AJ. AJ was much older than the rest of us. He was a technical genius with vast knowledge of arcane subjects who spoke command line as a second language before most of us even knew what that meant. His life was his work. But as dialed in as he was technically, AJ lived his life almost entirely unplugged from other people. No wife, no kids, no extended family he ever mentioned. He was polite and friendly even, but seemed to keep everyone at arm's length. Maybe you've known that type of person in your own department. The veteran who will help anyone, but never accepts help from anyone else. Some people are just wired that way, private and solitary, and there's nothing wrong with that. Then one day, AJ just retired. No fanfare, no farewell party, just gone. A few months later, he came back, but not to work, to ask for help. AJ looked hollow, almost a shell of the man he had seemed a few months ago. Now, he had the same mind, but a very different body. He'd been diagnosed with a terminal illness and needed someone to act as his power of attorney. With no family to call and no partner or close friend to lean on, he came back to the only people left in his circle, his work family. My boss signed his paperwork, and I witnessed it. And that was the last time I saw AJ alive. The illness took him soon after, and then life went on. AJ's been gone for years, but I still think of him from time to time, and I wonder if anyone else does too. While his illness had nothing to do with loneliness, I thought recently about what his final chapter revealed. When the road narrows, the quality of those last miles depends on who's walking beside you. AJ's story may sound unique, but it's really not. We meet people like him every day, people who are outwardly competent and constantly serving others, but inside are running on fumes. And first responders, we're masters at that. We take great pride at being the calm in someone else's chaos, but sometimes that devotion to duty becomes a quiet sort of isolation. We pour into the job until there's nothing left to pour anywhere else. And the research is starting to show exactly what that costs us. A long-term U.S. study found that adults who consistently feel lonely are far more likely to get sick and die early, even when you control for lifestyle and income factors. The U.S. Surgeon General recently said that chronic loneliness cuts life expectancy about the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And loneliness has been shown to keep the body's stress systems switched on, with cortisol and adrenaline and blood pressure running like an engine hot all the time. In our world, that means you can pass every fitness test, keep your cholesterol low, but if you're living disconnected, your body is still taking damage. On the flip side, strong supportive social bonds calm this biological fight or flight response that would otherwise keep us on a constant slow simmer. And AJ's story lingers for me, partly because of what the research keeps showing us over and over again. Human connection isn't just a nice thing to have, it's a deep need. Now I want to tell you about Ed. Ed is one of my long-term personal training clients, and he's well into his 90s. He lives alone now that his wife is gone, but he's not what you'd call lonely. His daughters visit and call and check in daily. They bring food and handle errands. They sit with him for coffee and they take him out to lunch on the weekends. I've been Ed's personal trainer for years and was also his wife's trainer before she passed. At this point, we're more friends than anything else. Every visit is part fitness session, part check-in on life. Ed recently told me if it wasn't for my daughters coming by, I wouldn't even be around. They keep me going. And I believe him, because biologically, they do. The difference between Ed and AJ isn't simply luck, it's lifestyle. It's the willingness to let people in, to let connection interrupt what could turn into isolation. Those regular touches of connection keep Ed's mind sharp, they help regulate stress, and they give him something that no vitamin or supplement can replicate: purpose and presence. AJ and Ed lived in different worlds, one steeped in knowledge, the other in retirement. But they illustrate two ends of the same spectrum. While loneliness didn't cause AJ's illness, it shaped the landscape of his final days. Facing mortality without a safety net is a kind of suffering no chart can capture. But Ed's life shows the opposite end, how relationships form a safety net that stretches further than any medical plan ever could. And the science agrees. Connection changes not just how long we live, but how we live through every stage of health and decline. And here's where it hits home for us in the fire and EMS world. We build our identities around the job, around being needed, and it feels good. On calls and in the station, even online. But the danger comes when being needed becomes a substitute for being connected. And that's the trap that AJ fell into. Giving everything, but allowing himself to receive nothing. Firefighters burn out this way. We call it toughness, but much of the time it's loneliness with a badge. We know how to show up to structure fires and pileups, but not how to show up for dinner with friends or how to check in on our own hearts. That disconnection can sneak up until one day, the only people who know us are the people we work with. And when the job ends or retirement comes, the silence that follows can be deafening. The antidote isn't complicated. It's connection in small, steady doses. It's sharing a meal at the station kitchen table instead of eating alone in your truck. It's calling the friend you've been thinking about. In fact, do it right now after this episode. It's scheduling social connections the way you'd schedule a workout. And when someone drifts off your radar, it's reaching out early instead of waiting for a crisis. The cycle of chronic loneliness is broken intentionally. Here's a couple of self-checks for you. When was the last time you reached out first instead of waiting for someone to reach out to you? Who would you call if you had a bad day? And when's the last time you called them or reached out just to talk? Connection is built like conditioning, through small, consistent reps. When I think of AJ, I reflect on what happens when brilliance and service go almost entirely unshared. When I think of Ed, I see how the simple rhythm of phone calls and visits and shared laughs turned his later years into something more lively than lonely. Connection doesn't just make life pleasant, it makes life possible. You can out-train or outwork or out-study almost anything, but you can't out-tough loneliness. So maybe the strongest thing you can do this week isn't another workout or overtime shift. Maybe it's a phone call or a meal or a knock on the neighbor's door. If this conversation hit home for you, I invite you to share it with your crew or your family or someone who needs to hear that they're not alone. And I also invite you to join me for our next episode, where we'll look at exactly how those bonds change brain chemistry, lower inflammation, and help us bounce back from stress. And as always, we'll talk about how to put that science to work in the firehouse, in the home, and in our own relationships. Because the truth is simple. People keep people alive. If you've got a story that you'd like to share, please reach out. I'll leave my contact information in the show notes. And if you'd like to appear as a guest on the podcast, again, reach out. I would love to make that happen. And until next time, listener, remember, connecting with people, really connecting, may be the most important way that we can fight wisely and age bravely.